Hey y'all, welcome back to Ascending with Ashley. I'm Ashley, and this is Freedom Friday. Today I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about like systemic social control and like what that looks like, and I want to talk about emotional manipulation tactics to keep social control. I know I've touched on this a couple times in a couple different ways, but I have a lot of examples that I want to share that I feel like are easier to grasp than like talking about these large concepts. So, really quick, like keeping people in control is a huge tactic of capitalist societies. And a big way of doing this is through emotional manipulation. We've talked about that last week. I talked a little bit about like using the adjectives and description words in like news. I know I've talked about that a few times to create like an emotional pull, right? Especially around fear. And we've seen this a lot in the past few years, right? Constantly being told to be afraid of shit. Ingrained in this rhetoric and propaganda. But I really want to talk about how these systems function with like our human emotion. I'm going to give an example. I remember when I was in Los Angeles and we were going to the police commission or we were going to City Hall, and people were sharing like very raw sentiment and emotion. Like the people were sharing this with these governing beings who were making these decisions that were impacting people. And like people were sharing like what it was like to feel like be in these systems, right? And I got to a point where I was just like watching. Like I would observe the powers that be as folks were like saying this. And there is absolutely zero relation happening in these governing bodies. And so I really want to talk about that as like emotional responses to things is not effective. It's not as effective as we would think, but it is used by the other systems to remain in power. So like we've been through a really horrible thing, or we've lost a family member to these policies or to a police shooting or something, and we're sitting there begging these folks to give a fuck, sharing our deep, raw grief, trauma, emotion, experiences, and these people are just sitting there with the audacity to not give any fucks, not even listening. A lot of the times they weren't even listening. They just felt like they had to allow the public comment because they had to, for democracy's sake, quote. So I just want us to remember this, is that the powers that be are going to constantly inflict emotional traumas on us to remain in this space of power. And I touched on this with like what's happening with AI scare tactics. People are, being set up for things. There's a lot of people just constantly inflicting fear. The buzzword fear mongering has gone around, because when we're in a vibration of fear, when we're in a place of being afraid, we are very easily controlled, very easily. We're not in a space of rational logic. We're in a space of like emotional fight or flight, right? And eventually, if we remain in that space, we're gonna burn out. We're gonna run out of energy. So the powers that be know this, and they keep us in these spaces of fear with lots of these different tactics and just the way that everything is being run. But I want us to really think about how when we share our emotions about things, I think that sometimes it can cause more fuel for their fire. You know what I mean? Like, we have to kind of get to a collective point of not showing that we're afraid. And it's going to take a lot of work, right? We have to not be afraid. But I think it's really important when we are in these positions where they're trying to keep us controlled. Woodstock! Woodstock! I think we have to not let the systems know how we're being impacted emotionally. I also want to bring up social media. So I did a lot of my academic work around like pathologizing behavior, and when I was writing my work, I don't know. It wasn't too long ago. You remember when Facebook added, they used to just have the like thumbs up, and then they had like a thumbs down, and then it progressed into like this whole long line of emojis that you could respond to. This is a way of mapping behavior and emotions. And so this information is given to these powers, and you're going to continue to receive things that are putting you in certain emotions. So, and I think that especially with social media, it's really interesting to see how folks just like duke it out in comment sections and like stupid shit. People get really angry. When we're really angry, when we're really afraid, we are very easily manipulated and controlled, and it's not a good place to be in constantly. So I just wanted to point these things out, is like, be careful about the way that you're sharing emotion, the way that you're letting these systems understand your human emotion. Remember that they want you to be afraid. Remember that they want you to remain in a place of easily controlled. And when you start to not give a fuck and not be afraid, that's when we become really scary and really powerful as a collective. So I just wanted to touch on that. We have to like collectively come to places where we are making our points, are seeking change, are organizing, I think for ourselves, yes, around emotion, but when we're doing this work at like a systemic level, whether it's going to community or, city councils or police commissions or whatever, I'm not telling anyone to do what to do. I'm just showing an observation. They don't care about our emotions, so we have to have a different tactic. What do they care about? They care about money, they care about power, and they can care about control. So they don't care how we feel about it. So just want to remind us that when we are engaging with these systems, to not show fear, to not be afraid, and not let them control you at that level. And that we really need to understand that these systems as a whole, sure, there might be, good individuals within these spaces, but like the systems as a whole thrive and even like have a necessity to having human emotion response. So the more we don't give into that, and I'm not saying let's become apathetic and heartless, I'm saying utilize this emotion in these spaces that we're building for the world that we want to be in, the new earth that we want to build, and utilize it in those spaces. But when we're doing like work at a systemic level, the emotional appeal does not work. So just wanted to share. They're going to continue to keep us in fear. They're going to continue to be apathetic to the things that they know that they're putting people through. The way that folks are having to barely survive, because there's an ultimatum in this for them. There's an ultimate goal for them. There is the continued power and control, money, greed, and all of those things absolutely thrive on having a human response of emotion. So I don't know. I don't know if this makes a lot of sense, but it's observations I've had. The way that like social control exists within all of these systems is just fascinating. But I really just wanted to share some observations about ways that we can utilize our strength, and just acknowledging that the more we share with an abuser how they're affecting us, the more energy they're getting. Ultimately, this is like the way that this system is running. They're feeding off of our energy of fear, and the more we give that to them, the more we give satisfaction to that working, the more likely they are to step it up a notch and continue doing even worse things. So I hope you all have a really great weekend, and I will see you next time. I don't know, I feel like I just want folks to be aware of that. So I hope this helped. I hope it wasn't too crazy off the wall. But I'll talk to you after, or I'll see you next week for Freedom Friday. Have a good one.